Good morning, Ike. How are you?
I'm all right, Bishop, and how are you?
I'm doing good. I got back this following Tuesday from Phoenix, Arizona, where we had a grand opening for another Israel United in Christ school, where our people can come and learn. And we, believe it or not, we have several sisters from the area of Nigeria there, of the Biafra.
All right, that's great.
They listen to the show,
Awesome.
and they're very
All right,
you
so
know.
what do you have for us this morning, Bishop?
Well, as usual, I always often ask you what is the latest news report regarding, the Biafra.
All right, as you always know, there's always a story. Basically, what is happening at the moment is the same Hausa youth, they are called the Iowa. They have written to the United Nations asking them to come and conduct a referendum in order to allow Biafrans to decide whether or not they still want to be in Nigeria. So basically that is what is happening at the moment. And on the government levels, they are still insisting, that there is no provisions for referendum in the constitution of Nigeria, which does not make sense because a referendum is an international law, which obviously Nigeria is a signatory to. And that international status obviously overrides any constitution of any nation, because if you are a signatory to any status, it means that you will abide by that law. And a referendum is a political instrument you use to determine if some group of people in a country still wants to be part of that country or they want to have their own country. So, but Nigeria will always be Nigeria. Please go ahead, Bishop.
I want to discuss and go over the importance of our peoples, those that suffer the diaspora, the 12 tribes of Israel, as often stated. When you read the book of James, chapter 1, verse 1, it reads, "To the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting." Many times people often overlook the word scattered. How were our people scattered? Well, the word scattered goes by several words, several names. In the Bible, it's also called dispersed. That's another word for scattered. And in more modern terms, they often use the term the diaspora, which is the scattering of a people from one country to another, primarily via slavery and colonialization. I want to open up with Joel, the book of Joel, chapter 3, if I can find it. I want to show all the listeners exactly the prophecy that God says would happen to our peoples from the point of slavery until the time of the end of the world. So I'm going to open up with Joel chapter 3 and verse 1. It reads, "For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Israel." So it begins with the Lord promising to return the captivity of Judah and Israel. Return our captivity means return us to our homeland, our true land. Verse 2, watch this. "I will also gather all nations." So the prophecy says that the Most High will gather all nations. This is an event that has not occurred yet. It is prophetic. Verse 2 again. "I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat." The word Jehoshaphat, it means valley of decision. God is going to make a supreme decision regarding what? Regarding who his chosen people are. So let's read it again. "I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel." So the first thing I want the listeners to understand is, yes, God has a chosen people. His people always has and always will be the true nation of Israel. Not the nation of Israel you see today in the land of Israel, which was established in 1948 by the League of Nations. No, not that. That is not true Israel. True Israel, God is going to explain what happened to true Israel. So I want to read the verse again, verse 2. Joel chapter 3 and verse 2 again. I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. So what happened to true Israel? It says, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. How was true Israel scattered among the nations? It's called slavery. It's called colonialization. It's called forced migration. That's how true Israel was scattered among the nations. Then it goes on to say, and parted my land. So the land of Israel, God's chosen land, by the way, has been parted. Parted by who? Parted by the Palestinians and the white man. Let me say it again in case I stuttered. The land of Israel, God's chosen land, has been parted or divided. Between who? Between the Arab Palestinians and the white man who calls himself Jewish. Okay? What are we reading? The Holy Bible. So now, I want to discuss that scattered part right there just for a second. I'm going to go to the book of Luke 21 as a precept to explain how we were scattered. Luke 21, I'll start at verse 20. This is prophetic regarding the year 70 AD. Now, what we read in Joel 3 is prophetic from 70 AD on up until 1948. All right, so I want the listeners to be aware of that. So let me start with Luke 21, and I'll start at verse 20 through 24. This is what happened to true Israel. Christ said, this is Jesus Christ, the black Messiah, speaking. He says, and when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. The armies Christ was warning us about was the Roman armies, prophetic for the year 70 AD. Verse 21, then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. The mountains is making reference to are the mountains located within Africa. And I'm going to prove that too. Verse 21, then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out. And let not them that are in the countries enter therein too. Verse 22, for these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. So Christ was warning us that the prophecies, the days of vengeance was at hand, and that all things which have been written prior to Christ's coming shall and must be fulfilled. He was making reference to several scriptures, particularly Deuteronomy the 28th chapter, verse 64, where it talks about the mass migration and scattering of the children of Israel. For example, all right, verse 23, but woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. Verse 24, and they, meaning the Israelites, shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So two things. What you want to notice in what we've read from Luke 21, verse 20 through 24. Number one, Christ told Israel to flee to the mountains. I made a statement. I said that the mountains being spoken of is Africa. Now already, remember, Israel is located in northeast Africa. already. Understand that. So what he meant was flee further therein. Flee further in. How do we know that that's true? Okay, let's go to Matthew chapter 2 and verse 13. Watch what the angel said to the father of Jesus Christ, named Joseph. Watch this. Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt. As you and I know, Egypt is also located in northeast Africa. It is located below southern region of Israel, so located in the southern part of Israel, beneath it. Okay? So let's read it again. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word. For Herod, which was a Roman, an Idumean, an Edomite, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So often in history, people reject and or neglect the writings of the Bible, proving that Israel, beginning with Christ, he had fled further into Africa. Okay, so now let's go back to Luke 21, because maybe some of the listeners did not hear this part where verse 24, they shall fall by the edge of the sword. The Israelites that remained behind to fight Rome, particularly the group called the Zealots, which means zealous ones or zealous ones, they fell by the edge of the Roman sword, and those that they did not kill and crucify, it says, and many shall be led away captive. Let me read it again. And they shall be led away captive into all nations. What does that mean? Be led away captive into all nations. It means we were scattered. It means we suffered colonialization and forced migration. It says, and Jerusalem, listen good to this, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles. So prophetically, Christ was explaining to you and I that Jerusalem would be taken over by the real Gentiles, particularly the white man, and later on the Arabs came in. So that is also backing up Joel chapter 3, verse 2, the bottom half. I'll read Joel 3, verse 2 again. And I will also gather all nations. Now, Joel 3 is prophetic for the time of slavery. Listen to what I'm about to say. Slavery, chattel slavery. 1948, when the League of Nations set up the white man back in Israel again. And what's transpiring or about to happen under the Trump administration. So let me read it. Joel 3, verse 2. I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Israel, meaning true Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. How were we scattered among the nations? Slavery, and forced migration. Then it says, and parted my land. When was the land of Israel parted? Well, in these last days, we are all familiar with the League of Nations setting up a Caucasian race in the land of Israel in 1948. So you have the white man who came back into the land in 1948, set up by the League of Nations, and you also have the Arabs there. This is why the Egyptian leader named Gamal Abdel Nasser said we would never respect Israel. When you read his one of his last speeches, he said we will never respect Israel of today. How could Israel leave black and return white? He said that makes no sense. Then after that speech came the 6-Day War, when America, who financed Israel militarily, and Israel defeated Egypt in a 6-day war, okay? Because Gamal Abdel Nasser made that speech and wanted to destroy the Caucasians out of the land of Israel. So now, let's go on. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 64. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 64. It reads, this is a prophecy that the prophet Moses said would happen to true black Israel. Deuteronomy 28, I'll read verse 15. It reads, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe, to do all his commandments, and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. What are some of the curses? Let's jump down to verse 64. Verse 64. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. What do we want out of that? What we want out of that verse is that true Israel would be scattered among all nations. How so? Via slavery, via forced migration. Understand, this is a teaching you will not hear in modern Christianity. You will not hear in the media at all today. Where did we flee? We fled into Africa, more or less. Then some of us fled northward towards Syria, some towards Saudi Arabia. But the bulk of us, listen good to what I'm about to say, the bulk of us fled further into Africa as Jesus Christ instructed us in Luke chapter 21, verse 20 through 24. Now, I'm going to go to this book entitled From Babylon to Book 2, written by Rudolph R. Windsor. I'm going to read page, where do I want to start? I'll start at page 78 and read through page 79. I'm reading this as a secondary source of information. Now, watch this. I'm going to begin at the bottom half of page 78. It reads, in Jeremiah chapter 44, verse 1, the prophet addresses the Jews in Egypt and the Jews that live in Pathros. Egypt and Pathros refers to Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. It says which is Pathros, which is Southern Egypt. Now, when you look on a map, this is a funny thing. I'm doing a side note. Southern Egypt is located at the top of the modern day maps. When you look at Egypt on a map, you got Southern Egypt on top and you got Northern Egypt on the bottom. I used to be curious about why the southern part of Egypt is located at the top of Egypt on a map and the northern part is located beneath. I said, this does not seem correct. Then after doing research, I found out that Ptolemy the Greek turned the maps upside down. And America has taken hold of that map, and all the European nations, they show the darker nations on the bottom and more European nations or Caucasian nations on the top. Ha! So now, that was just a side note. Let me go back to page 78. It reads, in Jeremiah 44, verse 1, the prophet addresses the Jews in Egypt and the Jews that live in Pathros, which is southern Egypt. Jeremiah tells the Jews in the 11th and 12th verse that they are not safe from Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the Cushite king. The people of Cush were Hamitic, particularly the Ethiopians. Okay, that's who they were. They were the power during that time. They are not safe from Nebuchadnezzar. This warning would naturally influence, watch this, many Jews to migrate deeper into Ethiopia and the Sahara Desert. So now, I want to read the actual biblical reference in Jeremiah 44. Let me get it. Jeremiah 44, and I'm going to read verse 11 and 12. Let me look. Okay, it says, therefore thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will set my face against you for evil, to cut off all Judah. Judah is the kingdom of Judah that was predominant in the land of Israel by this time. Verse 12, and I will take the remnant of Judah that have set their faces to go into the land of Egypt, to sojourn there, and they shall all be consumed and fall in the land of Egypt. They shall even be consumed by the sword and by the famine. They shall die, from the least even unto the greatest, by the sword and by the famine. And they shall be an execration and an astonishment and a curse and a reproach. So us going into Egypt was nothing new. During this time, we were forbidden to go into Egypt, but many Israelites did, and God promised that he would destroy us for not submitting or humbling to Nebuchadnezzar, who was the new power in the earth, for our disobedience to God's laws. Now, verse 13, for I will punish them that dwell in the land of Egypt, as I have punished Jerusalem by the sword, by the famine, and by the pestilence, so that none of the remnant of Judah, which are gone into the land of Egypt to sojourn there, shall escape or remain, that they should return into the land of Judah, to the which they have a desire to return to dwell there. For none shall return, but such as shall escape. So this was a proclamation against the Israelites, who refused to submit to Almighty God's desire for us to serve in Babylonian captivity. Many of us fled into Egypt, but Egypt was not us. We were destroyed there in Egypt. So, now, for the listener, I want to show you the difference between Jeremiah 44 and Luke 21. In Luke 21, God, in the person of Jesus Christ, commanded the Israelites to flee into Egypt at that time. Then we were allowed to do so. So now, I'm going back to the book From Babylon to Timbuktu, and I'm on page 79 now. Watch what Rudolf Almanzar, a scholar, discovers. Verse 79, page 79. By the time of the prophet Zephaniah, which is about 630 BC, Ethiopia and the adjacent lands of Uganda and Kenya were swarming with black Jews. Zephaniah says, chapter 3, verse 10, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed. See the word dispersed? Remember, the word dispersed means scattered. Scattered how? Dispersed how? Via slavery, via forced migration. Okay, even the daughter of my dispersed shall bring mine offering. This verse is an indication that the Israelites would be multiplying and making converts among the inhabitants beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Now, it says, no doubt, this prophet had communication with the Jews in those remote areas. Watch this. The rivers of Ethiopia connect with the Nile water system in the heart of Ethiopia. The Atbara River extends from the highlands of modern Ethiopia to the Nile. The Blue Nile extends from the direction of the Addis Ababa in a northwestern direction toward the Nile. Near Uganda and the northern Congo is the Bahar el-Ghazal River. It is 500 miles long in southwest Sudan, formed by the confluence of the Bahar el-Arab and Jur rivers in the northwest upper Nile. It flows east to unite as Lake No with the Bahar el-Jebel and form the White Nile. These areas are beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Now, let's go to the actual reference in Zephaniah. Zephaniah chapter 3. Okay, so the Bible is filled with many clues as to where true black Israel fled to and were taken from. Zephaniah chapter 3 and verse 10. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. So what I want you to see, God is not saying Ethiopia is his people. He's saying that his dispersed people fled into Ethiopia. That's what he's saying. Verse 11, in that day shalt thou not be ashamed for all thy doings, wherein thou hast transgressed against me. For then I will take away out of the midst of thee them that rejoice in thy pride, and thou shalt no more be haughty because of my holy mountain. God's holy mountain is in Israel. Okay, verse 12. I will also leave in the midst of thee an afflicted and poor people. That's us today. We are the afflicted and poor people. And they shall trust in the name of the Lord. Verse 13. The remnant of Israel shall not do iniquity. Notice what it's calling the dispersed of God's people who fled towards Ethiopia beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Verse 13 again. The remnant of Israel shall do no iniquity, nor speak lies. Neither shall a deceitful tongue be found in their mouth. For they shall feed and lie down, and none shall make them afraid. Then it says, sing, O daughter of Zion. Zion is another name for Israel. Shout, O Israel, be glad, and rejoice with all the heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Lord hath taken away thy judgments, meaning the curses of Deuteronomy 28, are prophesied to be taken from us, which encompasses our colonialization, our slavery, our false identities that we go by today. Verse 15 again. The Lord hath taken away thy judgments. He hath cast out thine enemy. The King of Israel, even the Lord, is in the midst of thee. Thou shalt not see evil any more. So that is the prophecy of what is going to happen, what is going to transpire. So now, what I want to do is go back to Joel, the 3rd chapter, because we didn't finish that. Joel, the 3rd chapter, and the 2nd verse. So, it reads again. I want the listeners to pay close attention. Joel chapter 3, verse 2. I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. This prophecy has not occurred yet, wherein all nations, including the European Union, gathers together to make war one against another. This has not happened yet. Verse 2 again. I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. The valley of Jehoshaphat is located from the land of Israel throughout towards Iraq, along the Euphrates River. That's where the valley of Jehoshaphat is located. Then it says, and will plead with them, plead with who? Plead with the nations, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Israel. Who is God's people? Who is God's heritage? Israel. But what happened to true Israel? It reads on, whom they have scattered among the nations. So true Israel is black Israel, which was scattered among the nations. How so? We are the diaspora who fled towards Egypt, Ethiopia, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, towards Western Africa, towards South Africa, and we were gathered there during the 1600, portion of us gathered there and sold to the white man in America, Europe, the East Indian man in India, in the land of area called Cedis. We were taken to China. We were taken to Korea. We were taken to Iraq. Okay, this is a history that has been covered, sealed. And many of our people, those of us who know this history, I'll say this, the scholars in the world who know our history during the transatlantic slave trade and the sub-Saharan slave trade, they don't like to talk about it. And no religion, particularly Christianity, talks about it anymore. It is a forgotten history, or so they think. But God has not forgotten. The Most High God has not forgotten what has transpired to our people, true black Israel. So now, I'm going to read that bottom half again. And will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. How was God's land parted, the land of Israel? It was parted between the white man who calls himself Israeli Jewish. In 1948, they were set up by the League of Nations. And you have the Arab Palestinians there too. Those two groups have parted and constantly fight over a land that does not belong to them. Now watch this, verse 3. And they have cast lots for my people, What does it mean they have cast lots for my people? The remnant of true black Israel that was captured and sold, that's what it means. They have cast lots for my people. Okay? They have done what? Divided us up, bid for us in slavery, colonialization. Then it says, and have given a boy for an harlot. What does it mean they gave a boy for an harlot? It means the boys that were captured in slavery, sub-Sahara, transatlantic, they made those boys into breeders. They made the boys sleep with their aunts, their cousins, their sisters, even their mothers, to bring forth more slaves, because slavery was big business. That's how the world economy got its start. That's how America and the European Union got their financial start above all nations. So let's read it again, verse 3. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they might drink. So the black Israelite girls that were captured and sold into slavery, they sold for wine, that they might drink. What does it mean that they might drink? That they might rape them, have sex with them, do what they will with them. What are you reading? The Bible. You've never read the Bible. You thought it was a white man's book, but it is not the white man's book. The Bible is the history of the Israelites, written by the Israelites, for the Israelites, in these last prophetic days. Facts. Verse 4. It reads, Yea, and what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon? Tyre and Zidon are two powerful African nations of today, and all the coast of Palestine. The coast of Palestine refers to the Palestinians. So what is God making reference to? African nations, certain African nations, and certain Arab nations. Because as many of you know, the transatlantic slave trade, it was not just the white man running in and taking us. You had black nations and Arab nations selling us for musket guns and wine. That's what the sub-Saharan slave trade was about. That's what the transatlantic slave trade was all about. Big business and economics. Verse 4 again. Yea, and what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will you render me a recompense? The word recompense means judgment. And if you recompense me, God says, swiftly and speedily will I return your recompense upon your own head. So God says, whatever you think you're going to do to my chosen people, I'm going to return your judgment on your own head. Verse 5, because you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly, pleasant things. So what does this mean? That the white man, certain African nations, and certain Arab nations robbed the 12 tribes of Israel. I'm going to say it again. They robbed us of our gold, our resources, our wealth. That's what verse 5 makes reference to. Because you have taken my silver and my gold. Watch this. I'm going to give you an example. One African king named Mansa Musa. Musa is a play on words. It means Moses. It is a Hebrew name. Okay, what happened? He was the wealthiest African king, and he was not African. Listen good. Although many say he was Islamic, he took that religion on, but his roots, his ancestry was Israel, a Jew. Many of the great kings during the Songhai Empire, during the Mali Empire, throughout Western Africa were black Jews. Facts. This is why I started off with Zephaniah 3 and 10. We fled further into Africa. We migrated and we set up great black kingdoms. Facts. Now watch this. In case some of you think I'm mistaken. Let me look. Bear with me a second. Bear with me a second. Let me go to the page in this book, From Babylon to Timbuktu. I'm going to go to page 90. Page 90. All right, to read some historical facts. All right. Where do I want to start? Okay. I'll start the second paragraph. It says, the Jews came into the Western Sudan from Northern and Eastern Africa as a result of a chain of commercial and persecutory migrations. So the Jews, the black Jews, were being persecuted. The Jews had settled among the most civilized people throughout the ages. They adopted new methods from other people and left their material, educational, and moral imprint among the people with whom they resided. For many centuries, the Hebrews had to employ great physical and psychological initiative. They could not afford to be complacent or apathetic. They were hated. So apathy could mean cultural stagnation or death. The Jews imported into the western part of Africa a superior material, educational, and moral culture soon after 300 AD. And this cultural advancement was not duplicated or even exceeded until the ascendancy of the Mohammedan leader Mansa Kankan Musa of Mali in 1312. Now, what I want you to notice that Mansa Musa, that means Moses, okay? This was in the year 1312. In the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, the Africans on the west coast did not possess the cultural superiority of the Africans on the north and east coast. This is because the black Jews fled further into Africa and brought so much understanding of things, it exalted those darker nations. The last paragraph now. The black Jews had an advantage over the African tribes. They carried their culture, history, laws, and written records with them. This assured them a constant precedence for the stability of the black Jewish culture. The Jews were not absorbed into the autochthonous population. In fact, the Jews absorbed some of the native tribes. The Jews made use of every opportunity. They were an industrious and skillful people. Now he gives an example. In the Jewish Ghanaian states were found kings, princes, governors, generals, secretaries, treasurers, revenue agents, judges, architects, engineers, doctors, historians, language interpreters, mathematicians, jewelers, sculptors, masons, carpenters, painters of art, goldsmiths, leather workers, potters, armorers, saddlers, blacksmiths, agriculturalists, etc., etc., etc. So now, I'm going to jump ahead, okay? Okay. Then on page 93, the scholar writes, he writes, the 15th Tsar Prince took control of the great city of Iowa in the upper Niger River, AD 1009. His name was Zakasi or Kosoi. Up to this time, all the kings of Ghana professed the Hebrew religion. Now I'm going to jump ahead. Bear with me a second. Okay, page 122 and 123. Bear with me. Page 122 and 123. Okay, I'll read page 123. It says, watch this. Like the black Jews in America, some of the Jews of Guinea don't remember their original nationality. So here the black scholar Rudolph R. Windsor realizes through his extensive research, many of the black Jews that remained in Africa, particularly along the west coast in South Africa, they don't realize their true origin. It says, like the black Jews in America, some of the Jews in Guinea don't remember their original nationality. This deplorable ignorance is attributed to various causes. Number one, the fall of the Hebrew kingdoms. Notice it's plural. Number two, the lack of communication with the Jewish educational centers. Number three, intense persecution and the deliberate blotting out of the mind their true nationality. Thus, now he quotes a Caucasian scholar, thus Nahum Strauss said this about Islamized Jews. Notice what he says, the Islamized Jews. So many of the black Jews that fled into Africa, further into Africa, became Islamized or Islamic. They took on that religion. It says, in most cases, these Hebrews by race and Muslim men by faith seek to hide their origin, which has become a burden to them. In another example, the persecution of the black Jews in Portugal was so ruthless and frequent that Cecil Roth tells us the Jews did not divulge to their children the secret of their religion until they had attained the age of reason. The Hebrew religion is such that if you deny your religion, you will eventually deny your nationality. This is why many of our people today who are located throughout the diaspora and still located in the west shores of Africa, they have taken on these new cultural names and they have denied or no longer speak out loud that they are Israel. It says the sociologists and psychologists know, and history has proven, that if you deny your culture and nationality over a long period of time, you will totally forget it through a process of assimilation. So that is, for example, the second source of reading that I wanted to show your listeners, that the Bible is the main source of information. The Bible is the source. We have to go there. But there are secondary sources and third sources that you can reference to substantiate the Bible, to verify the Bible. Okay? So now, back to Joel chapter 3 and verse 5. It says, because you have taken my silver and my gold. So remember, we were wealthy. From the time we fled Israel into Africa, we set up many black empires. Many black. And some of us kept the name Jews. Some of us took on Islamic names. This is why I made reference to Mansa Musa, who was one of the richest black kings in Africa. Okay? I'm going to read it again. Because you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly, pleasant things. So when the sub-Saharan slave trade underwent, followed by the transatlantic slave trade, not only did they enslave us, they robbed us of our wealth. Verse 6, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians. Who is the Grecians? The white man. So what did some of the black nations, the African nations, and the Arab nations do? They sold us unto the Grecians. What is God calling us? What is our name here? Verse 6, the children also of Judah. Let's read it again in case you didn't hear. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians. The Grecians are the Greeks, the white man, that you might remove them far from their borders. Where did they remove us to? They removed us to here in America. They removed us to the United Kingdom. They removed us to Canada. They removed us to India, Korea, to Iraq. They took us everywhere. What are we reading? The Bible. The Bible is our history book, written under the inspiration of God, by the inspiration of God, by the Israelites, for the Israelites. Facts. So, the Bible is the source of all history. You must go to this book. If you deny this book, you will be lost into all kind of myths that the white man has orchestrated and perpetrated in many of their books. So reference always the Bible. This is why, well, let me read that. Let me read verse 7. Here's the prophecy. Behold, I will raise them out of the place whither ye have sold them, and will return your recompense upon your own head. So the prophecy is, the places where we were sold, God says, I'm going to gather them again. This is what you're hearing now. For example, the Israelites who are waking up are realizing we must go teach the good news, the gospel, to our people who realize they're Israelites, as well as to our people who have forgotten they are the Israelites, this true black nation. Understand this. Even our people, the Jews, the real black Jews, who are mixed, who are what's called today mulattoes or Latinos, they must too hear this gospel and repent before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, before the valley of Jehoshaphat takes place, wherein God gathers all nations to fight and war one against another. We must return to the truth of who we are, why we were colonialized and enslaved, and what we must do to be saved by God Almighty. What must we do? Keep the commandments in the name of the Black Messiah, Jesus the Christ. Yes, we know his name in the ancient Hebrew was not Jesus the Christ, but that is the modern terminology used, and it is a reference point that everyone is familiar with. So understand what I'm saying. So now, let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. Watch this. Watch what the Lord God Almighty says about our people. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. It reads about us. This is what God says about us. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Facts. So there's no such thing in the Bible as equality. Let me read it again, because I'm sure some of you misogynists or interracial practitioners are saying in your mind, we're all equal in God. We're all the same. That's not biblical. Let me read it again. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. If you have a third grade reading education, you know the term above all nations does not mean equal to. I'm going to read that bottom part again. Above all people that are upon the face of the earth. So, the Israelites, true black Israel, which are we, God says we are above all nations that are upon the face of the earth. So, let me take a guess. Some of you interracial practitioners, you misogynists, you go, what about the white people? What about the other nations? Well, let's see what God says about the other nations. Let's go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 40. Let me find it. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 17. Watch this. I'll start at 15. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 15 through 17. To answer the misogynists, to answer the interracial practitioners' question, what about the other nations? Here it is, Isaiah 40, verse 15. Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing, and Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beasts thereof sufficient for a burnt offerings. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing and vanity. Wait, stop. Hold on, wait a minute. I wasn't ready for that. You weren't ready for that. What is God saying? I'm confused. I know you're confused. Let's read it again, and I'm going to explain it line by line. Isaiah 40, verse 15. Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket. What does that mean? For example, you are carrying a bucket of water, and as you are carrying the bucket of water, a drop falls out. Are you worried about that drop that fell out of your bucket of water? No, you could care less about that drop of water that fell out of your bucket of water. So God is comparing the nations to the drop that fell out of his bucket. What is the bucket that God cares about? The Israelites. The nations which are the drop, God says they're like nothing to me. So let's read it again. Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. What is a balance? A balance is a scale of measuring weight. If you put small dust, notice he says small dust. If you put small dust on a balance of scales, what does it weigh? Nothing. God is comparing the nations to small dust on a scale. He says they are nothing. Let's read on. Behold, he taketh up the isles or islands as a very little thing, meaning he could care less about the nations that are on the islands. Verse 16, watch this. And Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beast thereof sufficient for a burnt offering. What does that mean? If you burn up all Lebanon, if you burn up all the animals for a sacrifice to be God's people, God says, that's not enough for me to accept them. Verse 17, all nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing and vanity. Vanity means useless, pointless. Okay? So, what have we just discovered? That the Israelites are God's chosen people, which are we. God says we are a special people, a holy people, above all nations which are upon the face of the earth. But what happened? What happened to us? That we lost God's divine love like that. We sinned, meaning we broke his commandments. We went into slavery. We were scattered, which is the diaspora. We were colonialized. This is what happened to us. Now, but what happened? God sent his only begotten black son, whom the world calls Jesus the Christ. Now, what I want you all to see now, I'm going to take you to the book of Peter. Let me look. We're going to go to 1 Peter. Bear with me a second. If I can just find it. Okay, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. Listen good to what God says prophetically about us. Now, in the book of Peter, you read about the strangers and the Gentiles. In the book of Peter, the strangers and the Gentiles, listen good. In the book of Peter's, the strangers and the Gentiles being referenced are the Israelites who lost their identity, who went into slavery and took on false identities like many of us have done in this day and age. Here's the proof that Peter is not talking to real Gentiles, but he's talking to the Israelites under a Gentile frame of mind. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. Watch what he says to the Gentiles, the strangers. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. Wait a minute. That's the quote Moses made in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. Understand that. That is the quote Moses made to the Israelites in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. Okay? But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. What is the darkness we've been called out from? Slavery, colonialization. Under slavery and colonialization, we lost our identities. We lost our religion. We started to worship false gods, even wood and stone. We started to take on such false identities as African American, Nigerian, Ghanaian, European, so forth and so on, Jamaican, Caribbean, so forth and so on, South African, Mozambicans, Trinidadians, Latin America. We started to take on false identities, and therein we started to adhere to false religious practices. That's what it means when it says that you should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. What is his marvelous light? Reminding us that we are the Israelites, a holy people, a chosen generation, a peculiar people, that we are the people of Moses. We are the people of Christ, of Solomon, of David, of Hezekiah, of Isaiah, of Ezekiel, of Jeremiah, of Daniel. We are those holy people who suffered for our sins. Now watch this, verse 10. Which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God. What does it mean, which in time past were not a people? Our nation has been divided and destroyed. Some of us call ourselves Biafran. Some of us call ourselves African American. Some of us call ourselves Nigerian. Some of us call ourselves Sierra Leoneans. Some of us call ourselves Ghanaians. Some of us call ourselves Ethiopians. Some of us call ourselves Jamaican, Caribbean, Trinidadian. Through the diaspora, we have taken on false identities. That's what it means, which in time past were not a people. Nobody considers us a people. This is why the European powers dictate and rule over us, because you are not accepted, or we are not accepted as a nation. We have been divided by nationality. We have been divided by culture now. We have been divided by politics. We have been divided by false religions. So therefore, we are no longer a people. Even here in America, they call the slaves in America 3/5 of a man. They said they don't even equal an entire man. They are 3/5 of a man. So let's read it again so we don't forget the thought. Verse 10, which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Because for too long, it looked like God has forgotten us, but he has not forgotten. This is why he's always sent his prophets. He's always sent his Savior. This is why he did these things, because he has never forgot, though in our mind, it appeared or we thought God has forgotten about us. Why do we suffer so? Maybe God has forgotten about us, but he has not forgotten. We have forgotten who we are. We have forgotten our responsibility upon the earth to keep God's commandments, teach God's commandments, resurrect and gather our 12 tribes of Israel back once again and rule the planet Earth. We have forgotten our goal. We have been lost in politics, lost in religions. Okay, this is what has transpired and occurred. So I know, Ike, I talk on and on and on. So go ahead, I pass the time.
All right, no, it's okay, Bishop. If you can just start to round up, that will be fine.
Okay, so brothers and sisters, you who call yourselves Biafra, you who call yourselves Nigerian, you are remnants of the 12 tribes of Israel, believe it or not. I have given you facts, I have given you biblical proof, I have given you secondary sources of information that you can research. Understand, time is short. If you play in the political game, you will get dirty. Understand what I'm saying. Read between the lines of what I am saying. If you play in the false religions of your oppressors, you will get dirty. Okay? And ultimately, it will end in your demise. So, our goal, our job is to return as Israel, keep the commandments, and reach out to the scattered Israelites, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, true black Israel. So understand that. So thank you, Ike. And brothers and sisters, visit my website at www.israelunite.org. Okay? And you can visit me on Facebook at Israel United in Christ. Facebook. All right? Thank you, Ike.
Thank you, Bishop, as always. I welcome your teaching, and I can tell you, Bishop, not just me, but I believe the whole Biafrans in diaspora and those in motherland Biafra, they all appreciate, the good word of the Most High that you are giving to us on every Shabbat. Thank you, Bishop, and may God bless you and your family.
Thank you, Ike. Thank you too. And to all the saints that are scattered, shalom. God bless you all. I love you all. Shalom.
Shalom, Bishop.
Shalom, Israel. I'm Elder Nathaniel of Israel United in Christ. YouTube likes to shut our channels down, as some of you have noticed, ever so often. Subscribing to join IUIC will assure you will always stay connected to our YouTube accounts. We want to do our best to make sure this truth gets out. Please click and join our subscriber YouTube channel called Join IUIC to stay linked to all of our videos. So again, please make sure you subscribe to this Join IUIC channel to get your latest updates from all our YouTube channels. Shalom.